You are now watching the Conversations on Sinology podcast, where China's past and present meet global curiosity. Join us as we explore Chinese language, literature, history, culture, economy, and ideas that have shaped one of the world's oldest traditions and play a powerful role in shaping today's world. Presented by the Montenegrin Sinology Development Council.
Welcome back to Conversations on Sinology, the podcast where we explore encounters between China and the world through history, literature, culture, and lived experience. I'm your host, Jelena, and today we turn to the field of traditional Chinese medicine and integrative healing with a guest whose journey is as global as it is deeply rooted in Chinese knowledge systems. Joining me is Dr. Igor Mićunović, internationally recognized specialist in integrative medicine, president of Acupuncturist Associations of Montenegro, board member of the World Federation of Chinese Medicine Societies, and member of the World Federation of Acupuncture Moxibuction Societies. Dr. Micunovic studied at the Tianjin University of Traditional Chinese Medicine in China, where he earned his PhD in medical sciences and later completed postdoctoral research in clinical acupuncture. For more than 15 years, he has combined clinical practice, research, and teaching from China to Montenegro while building bridges between Eastern and Western approaches to health. Today, he serves as a physician at the Channel Space Clinic in Porto Novo, where he helps patients reset and rejuvenate at the cellular level. Beyond his clinical work, he is a Qigong practitioner, certified yoga instructor, podcast host, and co-author of books and articles that bring the philosophy and practice of TCM to a broader audience. His main passions include disease prevention, body-mind, soul transformation, natural healing, and wellness, making him a unique voice at the crossroads of medicine, philosophy, and cultural exchange. Dr. Micunovic, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to Conversations on Sinology.
Great to having me here.
You have devoted more than 15 years of your professional life to traditional Chinese medicine, including long periods of study and practice in Tianjin. Could you share with us how your journey into TCM began and what first drew you from Montenegro to China?
Well, firstly, I would like to mention that at the time, Montenegro was just a part of the Republic of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Therefore, we actually only looked from the perspective of the Yugoslavia. And it was just a part of me looking for the natural healings, because it happened that at the time, incurable disease were actually pretty epidemical in oncology in particular. Therefore, it drew my attention, and of course, I put my head on the other side towards more natural ways, and I happened to learn that Chinese medicine is pretty much integrated into the medical system of China. Therefore, I was pretty much interested to take part in such a system and to learn more about it.
And your background really is fascinating. So starting in sports medicine and physical education, then moving into acupuncture, tuina, and integrative medicine. How did your training in Europe prepare you for Chinese medical studies? And what was it like to immerse yourself in an entirely different medical paradigm?
Well, it is actually a pretty good question, because I would say that nothing really prepared me for China.
Right.
Because, as a matter of fact, before I flew to China, I happened to read and learn as much as I could about Chinese medicine. And, it all started from at first, the master degree at the medical university in central Serbia. And then it was the time that it was acceptable for me and approachable of understanding that Chinese medicine could be of course, explained by the Western medical terms and by the Western medical practices, scientifically, and so on. But when I arrived in China, nothing really prepared me that for that knowledge, which I would say that changed me and transformed me into something else, because I learned that Chinese medicine is more than just a sum of medical datas, but rather that the art of healing, which of course includes changing myself, transforming myself, of course, and therefore, um, yeah, nothing prepared me actually. In short.
That must have been quite a transformative path indeed. And if I'm right, and I think I am, you are amongst the first in Europe to have TCM diplomas fully recognized by our national ministries. Why was this step important, both personally and for the development of acupuncture and Chinese medicine in Montenegro and the Balkans?
Well, the background of 90s and beginning of 2000s actually brought so many characters into the orbits of today's and present time and the past time, people who were more, I would say, respectable in their fields, professional or so on. Therefore, when I drew the line, what is important to me after I finished studies in China, it was the most important that have those basic recognition of at least my own country, starting Ministry of Education and so on, because it happened that no one else did it in European continent, to my surprise. And because I wanted to work legally, I wanted to work as everyone would expect it in the respectable national government hospital and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me time, yes, and yes, I obtained all degrees, recognition, and of course verifications. What also was important to me at the time was that, in fact, I did wanted actually to stay aside and to distinguish myself from so many people who might be a good specialist, might be a good professionals, but not within the field of Chinese medicine or acupuncture. And because whatever people take the credits for taking courses of short courses or taking some medications, they're still mostly actually they're not complete. Therefore, to my satisfaction, I wanted just simply to separate myself.
Right. Thank you for that. That's quite an interesting path and quite an interesting story. From Tianjin, first teaching hospital in China, to luxury clinics like Aman, Saint Stefan, or as we call it in Montenegro, Sveti Stefan, and Šeno Porto Novi. Your practice spans very different contexts. What are the biggest differences that you have observed in patients' expectations and approaches to healing between China and Europe?
Well, the thing is that you mentioned actually those few ultra luxury settings. So the expectations are always related to luxury settings. So of course, very different. So Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, are set into that very conditions, being something very luxurious, which is not, as a matter of fact. But before I took part in Shano wellness clinics or Amman, I have had opportunity actually taking lead in my own clinics and working for several years. And my observation is very simple. While Chinese people in general, historically speaking, pay attention on prevention, on basically of the diseases, following certain lifestyles, medical approaches, diets, and so on, the expectations of treating illnesses, I might say they are maybe second in comparison to those prevention. Well, to the people in Europe, especially Montenegro, expectations is that the chronic diseases they got over the course of life, that they should be dispelled within days.
Right.
And this is very different approach, in my opinion.
very different approaches indeed, and you often emphasize personal transformations, wellness and prevention. How do you integrate these ideas rooted in TCM philosophy into your daily clinical practice? Could you give us an example of how you guide patients toward long-term lifestyle change?
Well, I could say now exactly, for example, because I happen to work
Mhm, mhm.
within Chanel clinics. Just for the context for your listeners and viewers, Chanel opened the clinic in Montenegro 5 years ago, and it is one of the leaders in, at least to my knowledge, in health wellness settings. So when the person comes into the Chanel program, what we do basically, we observe all the data about the person and so on. But in my very posts related to my own job, firstly, I try to be myself example. So I'm trying to by myself eat healthy, to do myself all the best what someone could expect that the person is healthy. And when the person comes, we observe someone's lifestyle, trying to as much in the future to change that lifestyle, changing the diet, and not exclusively following the new age or modern contemporary styles, but rather integrating I would say, all the advices we learned over the history, especially from Chinese, for example, culture, because I'm not sure, are you acquainted with information, but let's say to my knowledge at least, let's say three countries where the people live the longest, or so-called life expectancy, are actually the not exclusively China, but Hong Kong, Japan, and French Polynesia. So, of course, we can learn always about their diets, how they eat, for example, and then integrating, giving some recommendations, what types of physical exercises, and not simple exercises, but individualized exercises, and of course, breath work and so-called energetic exercises, such as Qigong, of course. And uh, when included Chinese herbal medicines, especially I would say aim for that very person, and acupuncture sessions, we're talking about present time, undergoing certain procedure for several days, but in the future, following my advices related to diet, herbal medicine, of course, physical exercises will lead definitely to some transformation in someone's life.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Micunovic, traditional Chinese medicine is both ancient and evolving. Where do you see the balance today between classical approaches like acupuncture and herbal medicine and modern integrative or evidence-based frameworks?
Hard to say, because when we start depends what is our basic position. So more educated physician is very unlikely that will accept less scientific approach. So for example, I can say only about myself, at least when I started actually following the Chinese medicine footsteps, I started simply from the scientific approach. And in the late 90s, even it was very difficult to find literature about that, especially in
Right.
any, not necessarily in English, but in any language at all. So I happened to, I would say, digest as many books I could before I flew to China. And for several years, I was following a very scientific approach, believing that at some point this will be pretty much convincing for the future patients. And what I learned, in fact, more we gain experience, clinical settings, education, and mentorship, we start actually working on ourselves, changing ourselves, becoming a better version of ourselves, and then naturally we start becoming more spiritual. So when we are spiritual, we start actually integrating those very classical, basic approach of Chinese medicine. And then voila, you see actually very often Chinese medicine doctors talking about very classical principles of Chinese medicine. And vice versa, well, a very young Chinese medicine doctor talking about science. So I believe it is that balance. We are talking about ages of the physicians, basic position, or vice versa. The less educated practitioner of Chinese medicine, not necessarily a physician, yeah, could easily digest Chinese medicine basic, I would say, diagnostics rather than following scientific approaches. So hard to say where is the balance, but I would say just fastly something about what is my position exclusively. So, and for that, I would just use one metaphor. 1900 has been found aspirin. It was has been patented by the guy who named Felix Kaufmann, and for the matter of speaking, the ingredients of that aspirin has been known for centuries. So Chinese medicine, at least, knew about that willow bark tree when it is boiled core might suppress pain, rheumatic pain, and arthritic pain, of course. But the contraindication is that actually it has people would have stomach aches, severe diarrhea, and so on. So it was also always a matter of what is actually bigger pain. So Hoffman knew about it. So, of course, he experimented with the willow bark, and with the first microscopes, he found that there are certain ingredients called acetylsalicylic acid, where he successfully synthesized it, made the first powder, and very fastly pill. Well, we know that for at least 69 years from that moment, 1900, it was advertised as a painkiller. How do we know that? Because 1969, Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, which is believed that he stepped on the moon, he carried the capsule in what he said are the biggest treasures of the earth, and it was exclusively something which I cite the 20th century painkiller aspirin. So we knew that actually they're faking that painkilling. So we know that today, of course, aspirin is not painkiller exclusively, but analgesic, antipyretic, dissolver of the blood, and so on and so on. So altogether, 125 years of existence of aspirin, we learned something that in comparison to, let's say, Chinese medicine prescriptions, there are many, which date back, for example, to the 12th century, to 11, or even older, which we can follow that very prescriptions over the course of history, the usage, documented usage, and in the end, in the late 20th century and the beginning of 21st century, clinically, of course, proved, such as medicine, for example, by FDA, Federal Drug Administration, the US, for example, we can follow that very usage indications and contraindications for the hundreds of years. So I would say that that blend of classical, but to come back to the questions, classical and modern approach of Chinese medicine, I would rather follow that classical approach, which dates back a long time, but in the end, in this contemporary time, has been proven. At least that's my position.
Thank you for sharing that with me, and also your amazing insights from the
Thank you.
perspective of yourself doing an amazing job in the field of wellness and TCM in Montenegro, using your vast knowledge and international experience, which helps definitely and adds to the whole story. But beyond your clinical work, let me just ask you another type of question. You're a podcast host, a writer, and educator. How important is it for you to act as a cultural bridge between China and the Balkans when it comes to spreading knowledge about Chinese medicine?
Well, everything we base our life on, it is based on our previous experiences. So, for example, Before this is just my own impression at least. Before I traveled to China first time, I could only base my own experience from those Chinese who lived in that case in Belgrade, where I spent some time. So I could only base my experience, and my expectations were exactly what I could see. So just imagine, the end of 90s, um, the end of poverty, the social system collapsed, end of socialism in general, actually brought so many holes, so many differences, and the collapse of the medical system. So people, what they were actually looking for, they were looking for miracles. One of those miracles presented by many was also acupuncture, Chinese medicine, herbal medicine, qigong, for example, and so on and so on. So people built their expectations toward those, I would say, impressions, what they had from the individuals who never undergone any practice or serious, I would say, clinicalships or internships or educations, not especially in China. So for me, it was very difficult. My first obstacle was when I recommended one of my patients to just simply by the name, I recommended certain sets of Qigong exercises, and next time, and of course, pointed that person to find it online. The person found it online, and to my surprise, he presented it with something very fake and wrong. And then he told me, no, this is what you can find online. Then I started searching on a browser, and I found that tens of pages actually are filled with fake informations in English, of course. And then I learned that something that, wow, I have to make it by myself. So I started actually writing first articles from the very simple desire to inform people what is right, at least. And over the course of years, I created a podcast because I wanted people to, to to hear at least more. My podcast is in English as well, and so over the course of life, I integrated myself into. Of course, I also formed medical associations and formed them with the bridged them and became a part as a member of the leading Chinese medicine acupuncture association from China, of course. And then I tried to be exactly what you said, link, and within the Balkan, and it worked well, of course. So I'm still doing that. I hope that will just be, I would say, more prominent than now, of course.
I certainly hope so. It certainly goes well. I can guarantee that, and I can confirm that. And finally, do you see as the future of traditional Chinese medicine in Europe? Uh, what do you see as the future, and what role do you hope Montenegro and your own work will play in that future?
Well, Chinese medicine, to this extent, it is definitely integrated in Chinese medicine body, Chinese medicine culture, and history. So, for Chinese, this is very much part of their own unique culture. For Europe, which, as you know, follow very rational and logical ways and roads, this is very foreign approach. That even Europe is, of course, transforming, and we are transforming into something better. Still, this is very foreign, and we are not ready to follow that long path of transformations and expectations to be, I would say, lowered than into the modern medicine. So I think that Chinese medicine will be very slow integrating into the medical systems in Europe. Firstly, to my knowledge, the only fertile place in Europe at the moment is Hungary. But again, is Chinese medicine going to be more developed and of course organized? Pretty much depend from the government's positions. That means Chinese government and host country. which happens to be, for example, in Hungary, that they have a great cooperation. We were on that way several years back. Actually, we had even some agreements of herbal medicine and development and Institute of Chinese Medicine, Herbal Medicine developments. Well, at the moment, this is not very in the best shape, but pretty much if University of Montenegro, for example, take part in these types of agreement, we can make it, of course, visible to everyone. And then we are talking about wide acceptance. Finally, I would just say that I see Chinese medicine developing, but in the slow pace, as it was always along the history. So that will be in Europe as well. Just my opinion.
Dr. Micunovic, your story definitely deserves to be heard, and I'm sure it will be more and more in the future. And it was quite interesting for me, and I'm absolutely positive that it will be interesting for the audience as well. So thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your journey from Montenegro to Tianjin, from sports medicine to acupuncture, from clinical practice to teaching and podcasting. Your story shows how traditional Chinese medicine can be both deeply personal and universally relevant, offering pathways to health, balance, and transformation. To our listeners, thank you for sailing with us on another episode of Conversations on Sinology. If today's conversation inspired you, I encourage you to explore more about traditional Chinese medicine, wellness, and integrative healing. And remember, every step we take toward understanding another culture's knowledge is also a step toward understanding ourselves. Stay curious, stay open, and join us next time as we continue to explore the encounters between China and the world.